The last patient of the night was a beagle who had eaten most of a foam pool noodle. I extracted what I could, gave his owners a look that said, "I'm not judging you," and drove home through the kind of Milwaukee January that makes your bones feel like they've been left in a freezer. 5 degrees on the dashboard. Owen was at the front window. He was supposed to be at his grandparents' until Sunday, but Doris had texted at 5. Dropping him off early, we have plans. Aaron across the street had let him in with our spare key. The door opened before I reached the porch. Socks, no coat, arms around me, his hands cold through my jacket. I crouched down in the entryway. "Mom!" His voice came down to something quiet and certain. Grandma and Grandpa ate at a restaurant. I had to wait outside. I couldn't come in. I stayed very still. "How long were you outside, babe?" He made a shape with his hands that meant a while. Until it was dark. I reached for his coat on the hook by the door. A blue, puffy coat I'd bought him in November at Target for $38.99. My fingers went to the zipper the way they always did every morning drop-off, habit finding the pull, and found nothing but cloth. The zipper pull had broken off. I hadn't gotten around to fixing it. I'd told Brent twice in December that I needed to take it to the tailor on Burleigh Street, and both times something else had come up. And then it was January and I'd stopped thinking about it. Doris would have known it was broken. She'd helped him dress every morning of that visit. She had sent him outside in 5-degree weather with a broken zipper on his coat and left him there until dark. I took Owen's hands in mine and turned them over slowly. The skin at the bases of his fingers was harder than it should have been, slightly reddened, almost waxy at the tips. Close enough to frostbite that my chest went cold in a way that had nothing to do with January air. "You're safe now," I told him. "Go pick something to watch on TV. I'll be right there." He went. I stood in the entryway for a moment with the coat in my hands. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor. I sat down because I needed to be level, needed to think from somewhere low and quiet before I let any of it become feeling. I am a veterinarian. I have spent 7 years asking animals to trust me when they have every reason not to, when they're in pain and frightened and can't understand what's happening or why. You learn, in that work, a deliberate kind of stillness, a way of moving in the space between what's happening and what comes next without letting urgency turn into chaos. I sat on the kitchen floor and I was very deliberate. My hands pressed flat against the linoleum. The cold from outside was still in the house near the baseboards. I had driven 40 minutes each way to Brent's parents' house on every holiday for 7 years. I had brought Doris birthday flowers when she had her knee replaced. I had pieced together Vernon's potato salad recipe over 3 years of observation, the specific proportion of celery seed to apple cider vinegar that he'd never write down for me, but that I figured out by standing close enough to watch his hands. I had smiled through every comment at the dinner table about how Robin isn't really Midwestern, meaning, not really one of us, meaning, you married in, and there is a difference, and we will never quite let you forget it. I pressed my palms harder against the floor. I had swallowed each response because somewhere below the level of strategy or reason, I had carried the conviction that patience would convert her, that if I kept being warm and reliable and present, Doris would eventually decide I was a Novak. My son was 6 years old. He was not in a position to be patient. I got up. I bundled Owen in a blanket, put him in his car seat, and drove. The Novak house on Birchwood Drive was lit in every window, warm and yellow against the January dark. I rang the bell. Doris opened the door, and her face did the thing it always did when she saw me. A fractional settling, a small internal recalibration. Never unwelcome, never warm. Something exactly between those two things that she had maintained for 7 years without apparently noticing she was doing it. "Robin, he's fine. You always overreact." I walked past her into the house. Vernon was in the sitting room with his reading glasses on, a book open in his lap. He looked up with the careful politeness he'd always shown me, the attentiveness of a man who is making an effort and wants you to know he's making it. I stood in the middle of the room where both of them could see me. "How long was Owen outside tonight?" Doris said. "It was cold, but it was not that cold. You're making this into something. How long?" A pause. Vernon set his book down. The reading glasses came off and he folded them, placed them on the arm of his chair with the care of a man who has just realized something is about to happen that his glasses will not help him with. Doris said, "An hour, maybe. Lily was having her dinner and Owen can be disruptive. You know that. He needed some time to himself. He's 6 years old. My voice stayed flat. Flat was the only thing I had reliable control of. Where does he sleep when he stays here? The guest room. Down the hall, I could see the basement stairs. The door was open. At the bottom, folded neatly against the wall, was a child-sized sleeping bag, blue and green. I had never seen it before. It was new. The guest room had white walls, pale yellow coverlet, a proper twin bed. Lily's things were on the dresser when I glanced through the doorway. A pink hairbrush, a chapter book with a bookmark. Doris said, "We had a lovely visit. He's been fed and he's had a bath. Vernon." I looked at him directly. The coat was unzipped, the zippers broken. She dressed him this morning. Vernon looked at his wife. In that look, in the small compression of his mouth and the blink that followed it, I got confirmation of something I had been telling myself I was imagining for 3 years. He knew. He may not have known the specifics, the sleeping bag, the restaurant, but he knew the shape of it. He had been looking the other direction for long enough that the direction had become permanent. On the coat hook in the entryway, the corner of a paper receipt was visible in the breast pocket of Vernon's jacket. A restaurant receipt. I didn't reach for it. I looked at it long enough to place it in my memory, in the part of my mind that was already, methodically, beginning to build something. I left without screaming. That surprised me, later. But Owen was in the car, and screaming would have been for me, and not for him. Brent picked up on the second ring from his hotel room in Cincinnati. I told him what happened. Flat, sequential, specific. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear the hotel room's air conditioning through the phone, a low hum that sounded like distance. "Robin, I hear you. I'm going to call my parents." "I'm not asking you to do that. Then what are you asking?" I'd been going through the list since I left Birchwood Drive. Not the restaurant, not just that one night. Christmas 2022. Owen eating in the kitchen while Lily sat at the main table because Doris had decided the main table was too crowded, even though there were 2 empty chairs. Easter 2023. Owen's basket was the drugstore kind, $5 of candy, while Lily's had a $50 gift card and a bow on it. I'd kept Owen's basket in the garage in a bin labeled holiday supplies. I couldn't have told you why I saved it. Something in me said, keep it. November 2024. Owen came home from an overnight with a bruise on his forearm that Doris attributed to roughhousing. But Owen went very quiet when I touched it, and wouldn't let me wash that arm in the bath. I read the list to Brent. He was quiet again. Longer this time. When he spoke, his voice had a different weight to it. "Robin, I know it's bad, but these are my parents." I had been hearing that sentence, in various forms, applied to various situations, for 7 years. It had never sounded like less than it sounded right now. "Owen is not going back there," I said. "Not until we have something in place." A silence. The hotel room air conditioning distant. Then, "Okay." I hadn't expected him to agree. I held that word carefully for a moment, turned it over, tested whether it would bear any weight. My neighbor Erin was on her porch the next morning when I still hadn't left for work at 9. She came across the street with 2 coffees. She was wearing a flannel jacket over her pajamas, her hair still flat on one side, the look of a woman who had been watching my driveway from her kitchen window and had made a decision. I showed her Owen's hands in the gray morning light. She set her coffee down on the porch railing and took his hands in both of hers, turning them over slowly, pressing gently at the bases of his fingers. 12 years of social work with Milwaukee County CPS before she left to raise her own kids, and she still had the hands for it, the careful attention of someone who has learned to look for things that children can't always name. "That's frost damage," she said. "Right there at the base of the fingers." She photographed both hands. Owen watched with the mild interest of a child who has spent much of his short life being patient while adults worked things out around him. He held his hands out flat and still, cooperating the way he cooperated with everything, without complaint, without asking why. "Go get your shoes, bud," I told him. "Mrs. Doyle's going to watch you for a bit." He went. Erin and I stood on my porch in the cold. The street was empty. A salt truck had been through some time before dawn, and the road had that dull gray mineral look. She said, "Tell me everything." I told her everything. She listened the way social workers listen, without commentary, just the occasional nod that said, "Go on." When I got to the sleeping bag at the bottom of the basement stairs, she closed her eyes for a moment and opened them again. When I finished, she said, "A single incident, even this one, might not be enough for supervised visits. CPS needs a pattern." I have a pattern. You have it documented? I have it here. I touched the side of my head. 7 years of it. I can date stamp most of it, she said. Then we write it down. She paused, looking at her coffee. She had a way of pausing that I'd noticed over the 3 years I'd known her. A pause that meant she was deciding whether to say the next thing. "My ex-husband's parents did something similar to my daughter," she said. "Not the cold. Different details. Same shape. I didn't see it for 2 years because I kept telling myself families are complicated and complicated doesn't mean harmful. By the time I saw it, I'd lost 2 years of my daughter being a different kid around them than she was around me." She picked up her coffee again. "I cut contact. My daughter is 12 now and she's fine, but I will never get those 2 years back. And I will never stop knowing I could have seen it earlier if I hadn't been so committed to believing the best about people who were showing me exactly who they were." She came back that evening with a yellow legal pad and we sat at my kitchen table. I spoke and she wrote, not just the list I'd read to Brent, but everything I could recall with a date attached or a cross-reference to another witness or a piece of physical evidence. Christmas 2022, documented by the family photo Brent's aunt had posted to Facebook, showing Lily at the main table, Owen absent from the frame. Easter 2023, documented by the basket itself, still in the garage, still in its bin, for reasons I couldn't have explained at the time but that now seemed like something my body had understood before my brain caught up. The Thanksgiving, where Doris had given Lily a new dress for the holiday dinner and told Owen he could wear what he had on, which was a t-shirt with a stain on the front from lunch. The birthday party where Owen's present from his grandparents was a pack of markers and Lily's was a bicycle. The incidents filled almost 4 pages. 14 entries across 3 years, each one small enough to explain away on its own, each one part of a pattern that was unmistakable when you saw them together. I hadn't set out to build a case. I had been remembering because something in me said the remembering mattered. "Aaron," I said, when we'd been at it for an hour. She looked up. "I didn't know I was doing this. I kept track because I couldn't stop keeping track." She set down her pen. "A lot of people do that. They keep track because something in them says the numbers matter, even when they can't say why yet." She looked at the pages. The numbers matter. 3 days later, Owen's teacher called. Her name was Miss Paulson, and she had the careful voice of someone who has made many difficult calls in her career and still takes each one seriously. "Owen drew a family picture in art class. I wanted to go over it with you in person, if that's all right." I went to the school the next morning. Miss Paulson met me in the classroom while Owen was at recess, the sounds of children filtering through the window like something from a different life. The drawing was on a piece of construction paper, the figures in crayon. Brent and I were upstairs in a house, a stick figure bed visible in the room. A figure labeled Lily was in a room labeled Guest's Room, in a proper bed, covered with a crayon blanket. A figure labeled Owen was in the basement, alone, on a sleeping bag. Owen had drawn himself the smallest figure in the picture. Small and precise and accurate in a way that 6-year-old drawings usually aren't, because most 6-year-olds draw what they imagine. Owen had drawn what he saw, Miss Paulson said, carefully. "Is there anything about Owen's sleeping arrangements at his grandparents' house that I should know about?" "Yes," I said. "There is. Can the school keep the original in his file?" She kept the original. I photographed it before I left. I sat in my car in the school parking lot for 3 minutes with the photograph on my phone screen before I started the engine. That afternoon, Erin and I worked through what she called the documentation binder, laying each incident in chronological order and annotating with date, cross-reference, and evidence type: physical, photographic, witness corroborated, or self-reported. The restaurant timing was the gap I needed to close. That receipt was in Vernon's jacket pocket, I told Erin. "If I can get the restaurant to confirm the reservation, I have a timestamp on the worst night." "Do it." I called Brent's brother Matt that evening, casual, looking for a gift idea. What restaurant did his parents like? He mentioned Carbone's on Wells without hesitation, said their parents went there at least once a month, said Vernon always ordered the same thing. The next morning, I called Carbones and explained I was trying to confirm a reservation from January 14th for my in-laws, a party of 3. The hostess confirmed. Reservation from 5:47 p.m., party of 3, Vernon and Doris Novak, departed 7:53 p.m. I asked for a printed duplicate and drove over that afternoon. 2 hours and 6 minutes. Owen had been outside in 5-degree weather, with a broken zipper on his coat, while his grandparents sat in a warm restaurant for 2 hours and 6 minutes. It had been dark for most of that time. The sun sets at 4:38 p.m. in Milwaukee in mid-January. I placed the confirmation in the binder between the photographs and the incident log. The binder was color-coded. Blue tabs for physical evidence, yellow for photographic, green for witness corroborated, white for self-reported. Aaron had shown me how to organize it the way CPS intake workers expect to see information: chronological, annotated, cross-referenced. I had done the work in 2 evenings. The organizing came naturally to me. I had been organizing information about Owen's treatment for years without knowing I was doing it. Brent came home Thursday evening. The binder was on the kitchen table. I'd been waiting to have this conversation in person. I needed to see his face when he turned the pages. I told him about the CPS filing I was going to make, about the protection order I was exploring with a family attorney Aaron had recommended. I showed him the binder. He sat across from me and turned pages without speaking. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of pages turning and Owen's show playing softly in the other room. When he looked up, his face had the expression of a man who has been handed a map of a country he assumed he knew and is finding the geography doesn't match. "My parents love Owen," he said. "I know." He looked back at the binder. "How can they love him and—" He stopped himself. He pressed both hands flat on the table on either side of the binder, the same way I'd pressed my hands to the kitchen floor 3 nights earlier. "That's the hardest part. They love him and they treat him like less. Both of those things are true at the same time." He sat with that. It was not a comfortable thing to sit with. He turned back to the school drawing and looked at it again. I watched his eyes move across the figures, from Lily in the guest room to Owen in the basement. His thumb traced the edge of the paper, near Owen's name. "My dad must know," he said. Very quiet. "I think he does. And he just—" Brent looked at the ceiling. He pressed his hands against the table. "He just lets it happen. I don't think he sees it the way we're seeing it now. I don't think your mother does either. She thinks she's being fair. She thinks she's being a good grandmother. She has a different set of rules for Owen than for Lily, and she has told herself those rules make sense." Brent was quiet for a long time. The faucet in the kitchen dripped. Owen's show played softly in the other room, the cheerful music of a cartoon character doing something uncomplicated and kind. "My mother used to make me stand outside when I talked back," he said. "Not for 2 hours. But she would send me out to the yard until I was ready to apologize. I was 6, 7, that age." He looked at me. "I always came back in and apologized. I always assumed that's how families worked. He didn't tell me not to file. He went upstairs. I counted that as the permission it was." Aaron walked me through the CPS intake form that evening, section by section on the phone. The form took 40 minutes. Attaching the binder as a supplemental file took less than a minute. I submitted at 9:47 p.m. and looked at the confirmation screen for a long time. Then I called the family attorney, left a voicemail explaining the situation, and asked about emergency protection orders for grandparent contact. 3 days after the report, a CPS investigator came to the house. Her name was Linda Marsh, and she arrived in a navy coat with a notepad that had a county logo on the cover. She was calm and unhurried in the way of someone who does this work daily and has learned not to rush the people she's speaking with. She interviewed Owen in the living room while I sat in the kitchen with the door open. She spoke to him at 6-year-old level, asking about his weekends with his grandparents, about where he slept, about the restaurant. Owen answered in his careful, considered way, neither dramatic nor evasive, just a child describing his experience the way a child describes the weather. It happened. It was cold. He waited. She reviewed the documentation binder for 45 minutes. She looked at the school drawing for a long time. She held it up once and tilted it toward the window light, as if the angle might reveal something additional. She made notes in a small handwriting that I couldn't read from the kitchen. When she was done with Owen, she came to the kitchen table and sat across from me. How long have you been aware of the pattern? She asked. 3 years, maybe longer. I didn't call it a pattern until this month. I called it complicated family. She nodded. She had a way of nodding that wasn't agreement but acknowledgement, the nod of someone who has heard this distinction before. The sleeping arrangements, she said. How long has that been the case? I found the sleeping bag 3 weeks ago. Owen's drawing suggests it's been going on for at least several months, possibly longer. He drew it like it was normal, like it was just where he sleeps. She wrote something in her notebook. And your husband? He's upstairs. He knows I filed. He hasn't stopped me. He also hasn't come down. She looked toward the stairs, then back at me. That's not uncommon. Before she left, she said, "This is a thorough report. We're going to open an assessment. Someone will be in contact within the week to schedule follow-up visits." The family attorney called the next morning. An emergency protection order could be filed based on documented harm. Given the frost damage photographs, the school drawing, and the incident pattern, she was confident a temporary order would be granted. I authorized her to file. The order came through on a Tuesday. Doris and Vernon Novak were prohibited from unsupervised contact with Owen Novak, pending the outcome of the CPS assessment. I stood at the kitchen counter and read the document twice. Relief should have arrived. What arrived instead was more complicated. A kind of stillness that came from understanding I had crossed into territory that would keep moving whether or not I was ready. The legal process was in motion. Brent was in the other room. He hadn't come downstairs when the envelope arrived. 3 days after the protection order was served, Doris called. I let it go to voicemail. I played it once with Aaron on the phone listening. Then I played it again. Then a third time, standing at the kitchen window watching the street where nothing was moving. Doris's voice had the quality of someone who had rehearsed the call and had decided exactly what she was and was not going to say. She called me unstable. She said using the legal system against one's own family was the most destructive thing you could do to a marriage. She said that Brent's brother Matt agreed, that Matt's wife agreed, that everyone who knew the situation agreed. And then, near the end, the thing she had been building toward, we co-signed that mortgage. We are going to call our attorney about what that means for you. I saved the voicemail. I saved it twice, once on my phone and once forwarded to my email, because something Aaron had taught me in the first conversation on the porch was that evidence only exists if it exists in more than one place. I told Aaron. She just made her play. The family attorney's answer came the next day. Under the standard mortgage agreement, a co-signer could invoke a covenant clause demanding early refinancing if the property was determined to be in legal dispute. But the clause required written notice. The cure period was 60 days. A voicemail was not a written notice. The clock had not started. I had 60 days. What I did not have, the income, a loan, to refinance $165,000. With Brent's income on the application, we could qualify. Without him, I could not. 15,000,000 more than 2 years of my salary before taxes, 6 years of an equity day, Owen's childhood home, the one with the blue shutters and the porch where Aaron had photographed his frost-damaged hands. Doris had known exactly what she was doing when she made that call. Brent came home from work on a Thursday to find me with the mortgage documents spread out at the kitchen table. He'd spoken with his brother Matt, who had spoken with their parents. Doris had given Matt a version of events in which I was unstable, using lawyers and government agencies as weapons against an elderly couple who had done nothing wrong. Matt had called Brent. Brent had not told me about the call until now. He sat down across from me. He looked tired. His tie was loose and his sleeves were rolled, and there was something in the set of his shoulders that told me he had been carrying this conversation around with him all day, rehearsing it, dreading it. Robin, I love you. I love Owen. But I can't let us lose the house. He wasn't asking me to drop the CPS case. He was asking me to talk to his parents, without the attorney. Just sit down and talk. Give them a chance to explain, to apologize, to make it right without lawyers and courtrooms and documents. So she gets an off-ramp, I said. She gets a conversation. I looked at my husband across the mortgage papers, the man I had married 8 years ago at the Novak family's church, because that was where Brent had grown up and it mattered to him, and because things that mattered to him mattered to me. The man who had watched me bring his mother birthday flowers and drive 40 minutes in the snow and swallow 7 years of comments at the dinner table, and who had never said, "You don't have to keep doing this." He hadn't known how hard it was. I had been too practiced at not showing it. I had smiled at every dinner. I had responded to every text from Doris within the hour. I had made it look effortless, because effortless was the only version of myself I knew how to present to this family. "Let me think about it," I said. Owen went to bed at 8:30. 2 chapters of his book, blanket tucked under his chin, nightlight on. He asked me if Grandma was mad at him. I told him no one was mad at him. He asked if he did something wrong at the restaurant. I told him he did nothing wrong. He accepted this the way he accepted most of what adults told him, with a nod and a small adjustment of his blanket and his eyes closing before I reached the door. He was a child who fell asleep easily. He always had been. Even as a baby, he would close his eyes and go, "No fuss, no negotiation." I used to take credit for it. Good routine, consistent bedtime, the right kind of nightlight. Now I wondered if it was something else. If he had learned, early, that sleep was the simplest way to stop being present in a situation he couldn't control. If falling asleep quickly was just another form of patience, the patience of a child who has decided that the safest thing to do is be small and quiet and still until the adults sort things out. I sat down in the hallway outside his room. The house settled into the deep quiet that Milwaukee gets in January. A weighted silence, heavier than silence in warmer months, as if the cold outside pressed against the walls and made even the air inside denser. Brent was asleep. The heat was running somewhere in the walls. My hands were cold even sitting still. Owen's coat was on the chair in his room. I had brought it up from the entryway hook without deciding to, sometime in the past few days, and now it was just there. I reached for it. The broken zipper tab. The faded blue of the fabric. I had bought it in November and meant to get the zipper fixed. Doris dressed him in this coat on the morning of January 14th. She found the zipper broken and sent him out in 5-degree weather anyway. She sat inside a warm restaurant for 2 hours and 6 minutes while he waited in the dark. I held it in my hands. The fabric was cold. Everything in the hallway was cold. 7 years of casseroles. 7 years of staying quiet at dinner, swallowing comments and corrections, and the expression on Doris's face when she looked at me, that fractional settling that said I was present but not quite real, not quite family, not quite the woman she would have chosen for her son. I had carried, without ever testing it, the belief that patience and warmth and relentless presence would eventually convert her, that Owen was worth keeping fully, if I was just good enough long enough. My patience had kept Owen in a house where he slept on a basement sleeping bag while his cousin had the guest room. My patience had kept him outside in 5-degree weather with a broken zipper for 2 hours and 6 minutes while his grandmother ate dinner inside. I had told myself I was keeping the peace. I had been keeping him in danger. The understanding of this came in layers rather than all at once. First, it was a cold thing, sitting there in the hallway with the coat in my hands. I pressed the fabric between my fingers. Then it was specific, each incident from the documentation binder playing back in sequence, not as evidence now, but as something more interior. The Christmas dinner, the Easter basket, the bruise, the sleeping bag. And then it was grief. Actual grief. The kind that arrives without announcement and sits in your chest like a stone. For the years of trying and for the small boy asleep in that room who had trusted me to keep him safe and who had been sitting, patiently, on a sleeping bag in a basement, waiting for me to understand that what he needed was a different kind of protection than the one I'd been offering. I set the coat on Owen's chair and stood up. I looked at my son in the nightlight, his face in sleep. His hands, slightly roughened at the fingers still, almost healed. I picked up my phone. Erin picked up on the second ring. "I know," she said. "I can't give her an off-ramp. I know, but I can give her a table." The shape of the plan was forming as I spoke, something that was not anger and not strategy exactly, but lived somewhere between them. A dinner, me and Brent, the two of them, everything I have, on the table in front of them, here, in our home. Let them see the full picture and make their choice. A pause on the line. Erin said, "What do you need from me?" "Come over tomorrow. Help me put it together." I got up from the hallway floor. I went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water at the counter. The mortgage papers were right there, fanned out where I'd left them that afternoon. I set the glass down on top of them. $165,000. The number sat on the page like a fact. which is what it was. Aaron came the next morning with coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table with the full binder, the school drawing, the photographs of Owen's hands, the restaurant confirmation, the mortgage documents, and Doris's voicemail printed out in transcript. The covenant clause requires a written breach notice, I said. She hasn't sent it. The clock hasn't started. So the threat was just a threat. The threat is a voicemail I have saved with a printed transcript. I looked at Aaron. At the dinner, I'm not going in angry. I'm going in prepared. She was quiet for a moment. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. Then she said, "You're not trying to destroy them. You're trying to stop them. There's a difference. Go in knowing that difference." I found Brent in the kitchen that evening and showed him everything. The whole binder, laid open, each item in sequence. The incident log with its 14 dated entries, the school drawing in color copy, the frost damage photographs, the restaurant confirmation with its timestamp, the mortgage documents, the voicemail transcript with Doris's words in plain print. He turned pages slowly. He was quiet for a long time. I stood at the counter and watched him read the way I watch anxious animals at the clinic, without pressing, without rushing, giving space for the information to arrive at its own speed. When he got to the school drawing, he stopped. He looked at it for what must have been 3 full minutes. Owen's crayon figure in the basement, smallest in the frame, alone on the sleeping bag while the family was upstairs. Lily in the guest room with a bed and a blanket. Owen in the basement with nothing but a sleeping bag and the word Owen written in his own careful handwriting above his head, as if he needed to make sure someone would know who the small figure was. He said, "I knew it wasn't perfect. I didn't know it looked like this." He closed the binder. He opened it again. He went back to the school drawing. He drew himself that small, he said. In his grandparents' house? He drew himself that small. Yes. And my mother saw him every visit, and she never. He stopped. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. When he took them away, his eyes were red but dry. She sent me outside, too, when I was his age. When I talked back. She'd send me to the yard until I was ready to apologize. I never thought about it as anything other than how she was. But she never sent Matt outside. Just me. This was new. He had never told me this before. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be sorry, be ready." He looked at me with something that had not been in his face 5 minutes ago. A clarity that came from recognition. "Invite my parents to dinner. Here, I'll be there." He looked at the drawing one more time. Then he looked at me. "I'll call them in the morning." They arrived on a Saturday. Owen was at Aaron's across the street, wearing his new coat, a green one with a working zipper he had tested 3 times before we left the house. I had made the switch from the blue coat to the green one without ceremony, folding the blue coat and putting it on the back shelf of the hall closet where I would find it again later, in a different season, in a different state of mind. Brent had called his parents Friday evening and told them it was a family conversation. Nothing more. From the way Doris walked in, chin up, posture settled into the authority she'd always occupied in this family, she had come prepared to accept an apology. Vernon came in behind her. He took off his coat carefully and hung it on the hook where Owen's blue coat used to hang. His face had the look of a man who knows something is wrong and is hoping it will turn out to be less wrong than he suspects. He shook Brent's hand at the door. Brent held the handshake a beat longer than usual, and Vernon noticed, and something in his expression shifted, a small tightening around the eyes that said he understood this was not going to be the evening his wife had prepared for. I had set the table for 4. In the center, a single manila folder. Doris looked at the folder. Then at me. I thanked them for coming. I said there were things that needed to be said in this family, and I would rather say them here, at home, than anywhere else. That I had tried, for 7 years, to handle things quietly, and that quiet had not kept my son safe. Doris said, "We've always been willing to talk, Robin. We've always had an open door." I sat down. I opened the folder. I placed the restaurant confirmation on the table. Carbones on Wells. Table reserved 5:47 p.m. Party of 3. Departed 7:53 p.m. 2 hours and 6 minutes. Owen outside in 5-degree weather while the sun set at 4:38. Next to it, the photographs of Owen's hands. Both hands, front and back. The frost damage at the bases of his fingers. taken under Aaron's porch light the morning after. Next to those, the school drawing, Owen's crayon, the basement, the sleeping bag, his figure smallest in the frame, alone, while the family was upstairs. Last, the incident log, 14 entries over 3 years, each dated, each annotated, each cross-referenced with physical or photographic evidence where available. I placed them one at a time. I let them sit on the table and be what they were. Doris looked at the documents. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's your interpretation. Owen is a child. Children exaggerate. Owen is sick. Paulson, his teacher, kept the original in his school file. I moved the school drawing until it was directly in front of her. Doris looked at it. Her expression was the one I'd spent 7 years trying to read, the one that shifted between refusal and certainty. Refusal to see what was in front of her. Certainty that her version of events was the correct one regardless of what anyone else produced. This is how children draw. It doesn't mean anything. It means he sleeps in the basement while Lily sleeps in the guest room. It means he drew himself smallest in the family. It means his teacher called me because she saw this picture and asked if everything was all right at his grandparents' house. Doris looked at Vernon. Tell her. Tell her Owen is happy when he visits. Tell her about the games you play with him in the yard. The puzzles. Vernon said nothing. He was holding the restaurant confirmation between his fingers. Doris turned back to me. We have given that child everything. We have given your family everything. When you couldn't afford this house, we signed our names. When Brent needed help with the down payment, we wrote the check. You don't get to sit here and accuse us of not caring for our grandson. I'm not accusing you of not caring. I kept my voice level. I'm showing you what caring looked like from Owen's side. Vernon picked up the restaurant confirmation. He read it twice, set it down. His mouth had a compressed quality to it, the same compression I had seen the night I'd asked about the coat, the same look of a man who has been allowing something to continue and is now seeing the full shape of what he allowed. He picked up the confirmation again and held it close, as if the numbers might change. Doris said, We co-signed that mortgage. You want to talk about what we can do? I'll call the attorney Monday. The covenant clause requires a written breach notice and 60 days to cure. You haven't sent that notice, and I have the voicemail where you made this threat, saved and transcribed. I said this the way you say something you have had time to learn thoroughly, the way you present a diagnosis to an owner at the clinic, without triumph, without anger, with the quiet of someone who has done the work and is simply presenting the results. Doris went still. Something shifted in her expression. Recalculation. The look of a woman who has just updated her assessment of a situation she had underestimated. Then she said, You've never been one of us, Robin. You married in. Owen is a Novak. You are not. There it was. The sentence I had spent 7 years dreading. 7 years making casseroles and driving 40 minutes and staying quiet in order to prevent. Every effort I had made was, at its deepest level, an attempt to stop these words from ever being spoken aloud. And here they were, in the air between us, at the table where I had served Thanksgiving dinner twice and Easter brunch 3 times, and where I had once stayed up until midnight frosting a birthday cake for Vernon, because Doris mentioned he liked lemon frosting, and I wanted to get to it right. I did not cry. I did not look at Doris. I looked at Brent. He was looking at the school drawing, his son's figure, smallest in the frame, alone in the basement while the family was upstairs. His finger was resting on the edge of the paper, near Owen's name written in crayon. Vernon said, Doris. His voice was not loud. It had the quality of something that had been waiting a long time to arrive, and was arriving now without drama. That's enough. Doris turned to look at her husband. Brent put his hand flat on the table between the documents and his parents. When he spoke, it was in a voice I'd never heard from him before. Deliberate, in the specific way of someone who has made a choice and is saying it out loud for the first time. My wife is Robin Novak. My son is Owen Novak. They are Novaks because they're mine, not because you decided they are. He looked at the school drawing one more time. And I can't unsee what's on this table. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. The room was quiet. Doris and Vernon left shortly after. There was no pretense of completing the dinner. Doris's chin stayed up on the way out, but her voice when she said goodnight had lost some of its certainty, as if the word itself had become unfamiliar to her. Vernon put on his coat without looking at either of us. I stood at the window and watched their car pull away from the curb. Brent stood beside me. After a moment, he took my hand. We stood like that for a while, watching the empty street, the January dark, the cold that had been pressing against the walls of this house for weeks. 3 days passed without a written notice from Doris's attorney, then 4, then a week. The family attorney confirmed. No written breach notice, no legal action initiated. With the CPS assessment nearing completion, we had standing to pursue a private refinancing. Brent's income, our joint equity, a new lender with no connection to the Novaks. The numbers required some working through. The new rate would cost us an additional $4,800 per year, roughly $63 more per month. More than I wanted, less than any alternative. $165,000. More than 2 years of my salary. It was also, as Brent said one evening while we sat with the paperwork, the price of the house being ours and no one else's. We signed the application. The CPS assessment closed with a finding of documented pattern of differential treatment consistent with emotional neglect. The investigator recommended supervised contact only, with a formal safety plan required before any resumption of overnight visits. The family attorney converted the temporary protection order to a formal supervised visitation order, naming Doris and Vernon specifically. Brent called his parents that evening. I sat in the kitchen while he talked in the other room. I didn't ask him what he was saying. I could hear the tone of his voice through the wall, and it was the tone of someone delivering information that was not up for debate. He came back to the kitchen and sat across from me. I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "I'll let you know when I figure that out." He looked at the table between us. "But yeah, I'm okay." He reached across and put his hand over mine. His hand was warm. Mine was cold, the way my hands have been cold for most of this winter. A cold that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the body keeping score of its own kind of accounting. "We're going to be okay," he said. It was not a question and it was not a promise. It was something closer to a decision, spoken aloud so that both of us could hear it. 6 weeks later, the Milwaukee cold hadn't broken, but the light had changed quality. In the afternoon now, between 4 and 5, the sun came in at a different angle, and for a moment or two each day it caught the kitchen floor and turned it briefly gold. Owen had a baseball game. His first season on a Parks Department team, 6- and 7-year-olds in mismatched shirts on a field that was more mud than grass in early March. I sat in the bleachers with Erin and 2 other mothers I'd met over the past month, part of a neighborhood parents group that had started meeting on Thursday evenings at the coffee shop on Locust Street. Brent was at first base in a borrowed coaching vest, a volunteer position he'd signed up for because Owen had asked him to. Owen came up to bat in the 3rd inning. His grip on the bat was slightly wrong, and I saw Brent start to move toward him, then stop and let him work it out. Owen swung. The bat connected with the ball, a solid crack that seemed to surprise him as much as anyone on the field, and he took off running. He didn't make it to first, tagged out at the bag, fair and square. But he ran the whole distance and stopped with his arms out like he'd stuck a landing, and he was laughing. Erin said, "Is he always like that?" "I'm learning who he is," I said. "He used to be quieter." She looked at me. "He argues about cereal now. He has opinions about everything. He told me last week that blue is objectively better than red for most things, and he had reasoning. Surprisingly solid reasoning for a 6-year-old. The refinancing paperwork had cleared 2 weeks ago. The house had one set of owners now. The name on the mortgage was Brent and Robin Novak. No co-signers, no caveats. $165,000. Carried by us, at a rate we could manage on 2 incomes and 10-hour shifts, and the kind of stubbornness that keeps you signing forms in a title office on a Tuesday afternoon. Brent's brother Matt had texted last week. Their parents had started seeing a family therapist. Not court-ordered. Vernon's idea. Brent showed me the text. I read it twice and set the phone down on the counter and went to check on the laundry. I didn't know what that would mean for them or for us. I didn't need to know today. Owen came off the field between innings and found me in the bleachers. His face was red from running, a smear of dirt on his left knee. "Mom, did you see?" "I saw," I said. "I hit it, though. You absolutely hit it." He went back out looking extremely satisfied with this verdict. Erin handed me the rest of her coffee. We sat in the bleachers in the thin March light, and I watched my son run back to his position. I watched Brent adjust his coaching vest and say something to the kid on first base that made the kid laugh. I watched the mud field and the mismatched shirts and the parents in the bleachers who had no idea what had happened in January and had no reason to, and I did not think about the mortgage or the court order or Doris's face at the dinner table. I was thinking about whether Owen would want pizza or tacos for dinner, and about asking him and letting him choose, because I had been enjoying the experience of hearing what he decided when someone gave him the question directly and waited for his answer. That evening, after Owen was in bed, I opened the hall closet looking for a cardboard box for donations. On the back shelf, behind the board games and the broken umbrella, the blue coat was folded, Owen's coat from January. I'd put it there when I got him the new one. I looked at it for a moment. The broken zipper tab, the faded fabric. The left pocket still had a crumpled tissue in it, the kind Owen always stuffed in there and forgot about, and a single Cheerio, which was the kind of thing you find in the pockets of a coat that belongs to a child who eats cereal while walking to the car. I could smell the coat from where I stood. Not strongly, just enough. The smell of cold fabric and something faintly chemical. The smell of the clinic that had gotten into my jacket that January night and transferred to his coat when he pressed himself against me in the doorway. Antiseptic and dog fur and the cold of a Wisconsin night all layered together in a fabric that was too thin for the weather it had been asked to handle. There was a time, not long ago, when I kept things the way some people keep accounts. Birthday flowers given to a woman who never said thank you, holiday dinners where I got the recipe exactly right and Doris mentioned that her mother's version was different, 40-minute drives through the cold, both ways. Never once with Brent at the wheel because he was always already there. Because it was his family's house and he would arrive first and I would arrive after, like a guest, like someone visiting a country that was not quite hers. 7 years of it, accumulated in my memory like a ledger I'd been keeping without knowing what I was charging toward. I don't do that anymore. I can't tell you the exact day I stopped. Sometime between January and now, between the night on the kitchen floor and the morning the refinancing papers came through. When I do something for Owen now, for Brent, for anyone, I don't track it. The effort doesn't accumulate. It doesn't feel like currency being deposited into an account that will never pay interest. It just is what it is. I can see, from this distance, what I couldn't see while I was inside it. The Novaks were not my family the way I needed family to be. I spent 7 years pretending they were, hoping the pretending would make it true. I am not bitter about this. It was what I did with what I had, but I don't have to keep doing it. And I don't have to keep holding myself responsible for the fact that it didn't work. The crayon drawing is still in the school's files. I don't need to look at it to carry it. It's part of how I understand what happened and what became necessary. The image of a 6-year-old who drew his family and put himself in the basement, smallest, alone, because that was the truth, and he drew it the only way he knew how. I closed the closet door. The coat stayed where it was. I would deal with it eventually, or I wouldn't. Owen called from down the hall. Mom, Mom, there's no orange juice. His voice was not small. It filled the hallway the way a child's voice is supposed to fill a hallway. Unworried, certain of being heard, expecting an answer and expecting that the answer would come quickly because that is what happens when a child trusts that the person at the other end of the hallway is listening. I'll get some, I called back. 5 minutes. I went to get my keys. The days are longer now. Enough to notice on the drive home from work, the sky still pale at the edges when I turn onto our street. Owen has a game on Saturday and a playdate on Sunday with a boy from his class named Felix, who is, according to Owen, very good at Legos but has questionable opinions about dinosaurs. He has made his position on this clear to Felix, and Felix has pushed back, which Owen describes as a worthy challenge. They have agreed to disagree on T-Rex, but are aligned on Stegosaurus. Brent is in the kitchen when I get home, making dinner. He hands me a glass of water without being asked. This is not new. He has always been present in the house in the practical ways, always helped with dinner, always carried his share of the groceries in from the car. But the quality of it now is different. A different kind of attentiveness, as if someone has opened a window that had been painted shut for years, and the air moving through the house has changed. Owen is at the kitchen table drawing. He draws a lot now. This evening he is drawing his family. I can see it as I pass. He's drawing me next to him, both of us standing outside the house, both of us in winter coats. He's drawn us the same size. I sit down beside him and don't say anything. I just watch him add a detail to the coat, a zipper that he is carefully drawing as closed and intact, the pull tab shown at the top. He holds it up for my inspection. Good, I say. He nods, satisfied, and goes back to adding more figures. I watch him draw. I've been a veterinarian for 7 years. I spend my days asking animals to trust me when they have every reason not to, when they're in pain and frightened and can't understand what's happening or why. The ones who've been hurt before are the hardest. They flinch at hands they haven't met yet. They need to learn, specifically and slowly, that this hand is safe. I know something about that now. Owen drew a picture in January, in the middle of a winter that had not been kind. He drew himself smallest, alone, accurate in the way children are accurate when they're drawing what they see rather than what they imagine. He drew a different picture 3 weeks ago. Miss Paulson called to tell me. She said, "I thought you'd want to know." He drew his family again. "You're in it. You and Brent." He drew the two of you the same size as him. I didn't need the photo. I already had the image. There is a coat in my hall closet with a broken zipper. There is a boy in his room who argues about cereal and has opinions about dinosaurs and runs the bases laughing even when he's tagged out. There is a man in the kitchen who hands me a glass of water without being asked. That is what I kept. That is enough.